The whip cracked across Ugak Ironblood's shoulder before the crowd's roar even faded, and still she did not kneel. She stood chained in the mud of the market square, above the black cliffs of Fjord, her wrists bound in iron that had rubbed the green skin raw, and she stared straight ahead at the longhouses and the gray water far below as if the men jeering around her did not exist at all. Blood welled along the line the whip had drawn, but her jaw stayed locked, her dark eyes burning, and when the guard raised his arm to strike her again, Noah Brooks shoved through the crowd and caught the whip in his bare hand. The leather bit into his palm hard enough to draw blood of his own, but he did not let go. "That is enough," he said, and his voice did not shake even though his heart was slamming against his ribs like a smith's hammer. The guard yanked back on the whip, snarling, but the crowd had already gone quiet, and out of that quiet came a voice smooth as poured wine, cold as the fjord in winter. "Well now, a peddler with a conscience. How rare." Lord Roderick Vane, magistrate of Fjord Hold, stepped down from the raised platform where the Longhouse elders once held council, his fur-trimmed cloak sweeping the mud, his rings catching the gray morning light. He was not a large man, not compared to the orc woman chained before him, but he carried himself like a man who had never once in his life been told no and meant to keep it that way. "She killed 3 of my soldiers on the high pass," Vane said, gesturing at Ugak as though she were livestock at a fair. "By hold law that is a hanging offense, but I am a generous man. I have decided instead to let the market decide her worth. In 7 days I will sell her to the highest bidder here, before every soul in this hold and every lord I have invited to witness it. A fitting spectacle, do you not think? The great terror of the Ironblood clan, sold like a prize heifer." A ripple of ugly laughter moved through the crowd, though Noah noticed not everyone laughed. Some of the Highland folk, weathered fishermen and shepherds who had traded honestly with orc clans for generations, looked away, ashamed. Noah still had the whip in his fist. He looked past Vane to the woman in chains, and for one strange, suspended moment her eyes met his. There was no fear in them. There was fury, and something else beneath the fury that looked almost like exhaustion, like a woman who had been fighting her whole life and had simply run out of road. "I will buy her freedom now," Noah said, and the words left him before he had fully thought them through. "Whatever price you name." Vane's eyebrows rose in genuine delight. He looked Noah up and down, taking in the patched leather coat, the dust of 40 Highland roads ground into his boots, the modest cart of trade goods parked at the edge of the square. "With what, Peddler? Your pots and needles, your ribbons and salt." Vane laughed, a short, sharp bark, and the crowd laughed with him. He reached into his own purse and flung a handful of copper coins into the mud at Noah's feet. "There, buy her with that if you like. I will even throw in the chains for free." Noah did not move to pick up the coins. He kept his eyes on Ugak instead, on the way her chin lifted a fraction higher, as if she refused to let herself be pitied even now. 7 days, Noah said quietly, more to himself than to Vane. "Then I will be here in 7 days with a fortune to match any lord you invite." Vane's smile did not falter, but something behind his eyes went flat and calculating. "How touching! Guards, get this fool out of my square before I decide his sentiment is treason." They dragged Noah back by the collar of his coat, and the last thing he saw before the crowd swallowed him was Ugak Ironblood watching him go, her expression unreadable, her chains rattling as 2 soldiers hauled her toward the old fish cellar that had been converted into a holding cell dug into the cliffside beneath the longhouses. He did not sleep that night. He sat in his cart at the edge of the trading grounds outside the hold's palisade, staring up at the black shapes of the longhouses against the stars, and he thought about the fury in her eyes, and the whip mark on her shoulder, and the 7 days Vane had so mockingly granted him. He had spent 11 years walking the back roads of the Highlands, trading needles for furs, salt for silver, honest goods at honest prices to whoever would deal fairly with him, human or orc alike. He knew every game trail and smuggler's cut between Fjord and the mountain passes. He knew which orc clans still remembered him kindly from his father's trading days, and which held grudges from wars 2 generations gone. He had no family left to speak of, no home besides his cart and the open road, and he had told himself for years that this suited him fine, that a man alone had fewer ways to be hurt. But something in the way that woman had refused to kneel had cracked something loose in his chest that he did not fully understand yet, and he knew, sitting there beneath the cold stars, that he was not going to let Roderick Vane sell her like cattle, whatever it cost him. He waited until the 3rd hour past midnight, when the guards on the cliff path had thinned to a single board sentry dozing near a brazier, and then he took a coil of rope, a wedge of hard cheese, and a skin of water, and he climbed down toward the fish cellar cut into the rock. The door was old, iron-banded oak, and the lock was the same crude style he had seen on a dozen storehouses along the coast. He had picked worse locks trading through smugglers' towns. His hands trembled slightly, more from nerves than cold, but the tumblers gave with a soft click, and he eased the door open onto darkness that smelled of brine and old fish, and beneath that blood. "Come to finish what the whip started, human." Her voice came out of the dark, low and rough but steady. Noah held up the water skin, though he doubted she could see it. "I came to bring you water, and food, if you will take it from my hand." There was a long silence, then the clink of chains shifting. Why? It was not really a question, more an accusation, and Noah found he did not have a clever answer for it. He crouched at the edge of the cell, close enough now that his eyes had adjusted, and he could make out her shape against the far wall, sitting upright despite everything, her wrists still shackled to an iron ring set in the stone. "Because no creature should be whipped in the mud for a crowd's amusement," he said. "Because I have traded with your people longer than I have done almost anything else in my life, and I know that clan law would call what Vane is doing a crime worse than anything you are accused of. And because," he stopped, searching for the honest words, "because when you looked at me today, you did not look away. Most people, when Vane humiliates them, they look away. You did not." Another silence, shorter this time. Then grudgingly, "Give me the water." He crossed the small space and pressed the skin into her bound hands, careful not to let his fingers linger too long against hers, though he felt the rough calluses of a warrior's grip even in that brief contact. She drank deeply, then tore into the cheese he offered with the focused hunger of someone who had not eaten properly in days. "They feed you nothing?" he asked, anger sparking hot and sudden in his chest. "They feed me enough to keep me alive for the auction. A dead prize is worth less than a living one." Her voice was bitter, but there was a dry edge to it too, almost amusement at her own situation. "You are the peddler from the square. Noah Brooks. Ugak Ironblood." She said it like a challenge, like she expected the name to mean something to him, and it did. "Ironblood," he repeated. "Your clan holds the high valleys past Thornridge Pass. I traded copper kettles to your kin 3 summers past. An older woman, gray at the temples, drove a hard bargain over a set of iron pins." For the first time, something that might have been the ghost of surprise crossed Ugak's face in the dim light. "My mother. She still complains that the peddler cheated her on the price." "She cheated me," Noah said, and to his astonishment, Ugak Ironblood laughed. It was a short, rusty sound like it had not been used in a long while, but it was real, and it did something strange and warm to Noah's chest to have caused it. "You said 7 days," she said, sobering. "You cannot mean to actually raise a fortune for me, human. Vane does not intend to let anyone buy me free. The auction is a trap. He wants my clan to hear of it and come raging down from the highlands to save me. So he has an excuse to march his soldiers up Thornridge Pass and take our valleys while the other lords watch and call it justice." Noah felt the floor of his plan shift beneath him, but he did not let it show. "Then I will simply have to make certain your clan does not need to come raging down at all. I will buy you free myself, fair and legal, before any of that can happen. Why would you spend everything you own on a stranger, an orc, a woman you met an hour ago in chains?" He thought about lying, about giving some noble answer about justice and law. Instead, he told her the truth. Because I have walked these roads alone for 11 years, Ugak Ironblood, and I have never once in all that time wanted to stop walking for anyone. Until today." She did not answer that, but when he rose to leave before dawn could betray him, he felt her eyes on him the whole way to the door, and something had shifted in the dark, quiet cell that neither of them said aloud. He came back the next night, and the next, always past midnight, always with food and water and the same careful lock-picking, and each night they talked a little longer, the chains between them loosening even if the iron ones on her wrists did not. She told him of her clan, of her brother Grosh who led them now that their father had fallen in the border wars, of the valley she had been patrolling when vain soldiers ambushed her scouting party, and she had fought free of 3 men before a 4th struck her from behind. She did not speak of it as tragedy, only as fact, the way a woodsman might speak of a storm that had taken half his roof. He told her of his own life, the mother who had died of a winter fever when he was 12, the father who had raised him on the trading roads and passed on to him nothing but a cart, a mule, and the names of every honest trading post between the coast and the mountains. He told her he had never married, never much wanted to, because a life on the road left little room for roots, and he had made his peace with that loneliness the way a man makes peace with an old wound that never quite heals but no longer bleeds either. "That is a sad way to live," Ugak said on the 3rd night, watching him with those dark, fierce eyes that had somehow stopped being frightening to him and started being something else entirely. "It was," he admitted, "until this week." She was quiet a long moment, and then, slowly, deliberately, she reached through the bars with her bound hands and touched his jaw, her rough fingers impossibly gentle. "You are a strange human, Noah Brooks." "I have been told." His breath had gone unsteady, his whole body suddenly, achingly aware of how close she was, of the warmth of her skin against his in the cold dark of the cell. "Ugak, do not make promises you cannot keep, Peddler." Her voice had dropped low, rough with something that was not quite a warning. "I have had enough of men's promises. I am not most men." "No," she agreed softly, "you are not." And then she kissed him. It was not gentle. It was fierce and searching and a little desperate. The kiss of a woman who had spent days chained in the dark believing she would never again touch anything softer than iron. And Noah kissed her back with everything he had, his hands coming up to cradle her face through the bars, careful of the chain, careful of her. And when they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "That," Ugak said, "was not a promise I asked you to keep." "No," Noah agreed, dazed and grinning like a fool in the dark. "That was something else entirely." He left before dawn with the taste of her still on his lips and a fire in his chest that no Highland wind could put out, and he knew with absolute clarity that he was no longer simply trying to save a stranger. He was trying to save the woman he had somehow, impossibly, in 3 short nights, fallen in love with. The days that followed were a blur of desperate, calculated motion. Noah took his cart out on the back roads he knew better than any man alive, roads that ran through smugglers' cuts and shepherds' tracks and half-forgotten orc trading paths that no magistrate's soldier had ever bothered to map. He called in every favor 11 years of honest trading had earned him. He sold his father's silver trading scales to a coastal merchant who had always coveted them. He traded a chest of rare eastern spices, saved for years against hard times, to a trading post keeper who paid him in gold rather than goods. He rode 2 days north to a fishing village where an orc elder named Cressa, who remembered his father fondly, gave him a pouch of amber and pearl that her clan had kept as bride wealth for a daughter who had died before her wedding, pressing it into his hands with fierce, tear-bright eyes and telling him to use it to buy an Ironblood woman's freedom. For the Ironblood clan had once sheltered her people through a hard winter, and the debt had never been repaid. He rode through rain and over scree slopes that could have broken his mule's legs, and twice he had to hide his cart in a gully and lie flat in the bracken, while patrols of vain soldiers rode past, searching the roads for anyone who might be smuggling word to the Ironblood clan. He did not sleep more than a few hours a night. He came back to Fjord each night gaunt and filthy and aching in every joint, and each night he still climbed down to the fish cellar to bring Ugak water and food, and the news of his slow, grinding progress, and each night she kissed him at the bars like it might be the last time, and each night it became harder and harder for either of them to imagine surviving without the other. On the fifth night, she told him something that changed everything. "There is an old law of the hold," she said, her fingers laced through the bars with his. "Older than Vane, older than his father who held this seat before him, trial by combat. Any accused may demand it in place of the market's judgment, if a sponsor of standing will vouch for them and pay the right of challenge. It has not been invoked in 30 years, but it has never been struck from the hold's charter. My mother told me of it once from the old days when the clan still had dealings with the hold's founding council." Noah's mind raced. "If I can invoke that law and pay whatever price it demands, then Vane cannot simply sell me or hang me. The matter must be settled by combat, before witnesses, and by the old charter he cannot refuse it without losing face before every lord he has invited to watch his little spectacle." Ugak's eyes glittered in the dark. "But he will not send some untrained soldier to fight. He will send his champion, Sir Aldrich Kane, and Kane has killed 12 men in the ring and never lost. I have heard the soldiers speak of him with fear, and soldiers do not fear easily. Then I will need a fighter of my own to sponsor," Noah said slowly, "and I do not know one soul in this hold who would dare stand against Kane for a stranger's cause." Ugak's hand tightened around his through the bars. "The law does not say the accused must have a champion fight in their place, Noah. It says the accused may fight for their own freedom if their sponsor arms them and stands surety for their conduct. Free my hands. Give me back my weapon. I will fight for myself." He looked at her, chained and starved and bruised, and felt fear claw up his throat at the thought of her facing a trained killer after days in a cell. But he also saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had refused to kneel in the mud on the first day he ever saw her, and he understood with a lover's aching clarity that trying to protect her from this fight would be its own kind of cruelty, a refusal to see her as the warrior she was. "Then that is what we will do," he said. "I will find the coin for the right of challenge if it costs me everything I own." "It already has," she said softly, and he laughed, low and rough, because it was true and because he did not care. On the 6th night he came to her with a full purse and a plan, and also with fear sitting cold in his belly because he had learned that day, from a frightened stable boy who owed him a favor, that Vane knew of the old law too, and had already sent riders to fetch Sir Aldrich Kane's finest armor from the coast, meaning the magistrate had anticipated this move and meant to make certain the fight, however legal, would still be a slaughter. "He will cheat," Ugak said flatly when Noah told her. "Vane is not a man who risks losing anything fairly. Then we will simply have to make certain enough people are watching that he cannot cheat without every lord in this hold seeing it happen." Noah pressed his forehead to the bars, to hers, breathing her in, salt and iron and the wild green smell of her that he had come to crave like a man craves water. "I am afraid, Ugak. Not of the coin, not of Vane. I am afraid of losing you the moment I have finally found you." "You have not lost me yet, Peddler," she murmured, and kissed him slow and deep and achingly tender, a different kiss than the fierce, desperate ones before, this one full of something that felt dangerously close to a vow. "Whatever happens tomorrow, know that I chose you first. Before the fight, before the freedom, I chose you, Noah Brooks, the night you brought me water and did not ask for anything in return." He held her face in his hands as best the bars allowed and whispered against her lips, "And I choose you, Ugak Ironblood, now and for as many days as the both of us are given." Neither of them slept much that night, and when dawn came gray and cold over the fjord, Noah Brooks walked into Roderick Vane's market square carrying a chest of gold, gems, and Bridewelth amber, and a fire in his chest that no whip or blade could touch. The square was more crowded than Noah had ever seen it, packed shoulder to shoulder with hold folk, fishermen, shepherds, merchants down from the mountain roads, and no fewer than 4 visiting lords with their retinues, drawn by Vane's invitations and the promise of a rare spectacle. Banners snapped in the fjord wind. Somewhere a drum was beating a slow, ominous rhythm. Ugak stood on the platform in her chains, and Noah's heart clenched at the sight of her, thinner than she had been a week ago but standing straight-backed, her chin high, refusing even now to give the crowd the satisfaction of seeing her broken. She wore the same fitted travel leather she had been captured in, dark green-brown hide laced snug across her chest and waist, sleeves cut close to muscled arms marked with old scars and the fresh bruises of captivity, the leather scuffed and torn in places from the fight that had taken her, but still hers, still a warrior's garb even stripped of its weapons. Noah thought, looking at her, that he had never in his life seen anything so fiercely, achingly beautiful. Vane stood on the platform beside her, resplendent in furs, clearly enjoying the size of his audience. When he spotted Noah pushing through the crowd with the chest, his smile widened like a wolf scenting blood. "The peddler returns," he called out, loud enough for the whole square to hear, "and bearing gifts no less. Come then, let us see this fortune you promised." Noah climbed the platform steps and set the chest down, opening it so the gold and gems caught the morning light. A murmur ran through the crowd at the sight of it, real awe at the small fortune Noah had bled himself dry to gather. "This is my final bid," Noah said, loud enough to carry. "But I do not offer it for the auction, Lord Vane. I invoke the old right of the Hold's charter, trial by combat in place of judgment. I stand as sponsor, and I pay the right of challenge in full." The square went utterly silent. Vane's smile did not move, but his eyes had gone hard and flat. "That law is 30 years dead, Peddler. It has never been struck from the charter," Noah said, and here he was grateful beyond words for old Cressa, who had not only given him bride wealth but also, upon hearing his plan, produced from her own chest a yellowed scrap of parchment, a copy of the founding charter her clan had kept since the days when Hold and clan still dealt as equals. He drew it now from inside his coat and held it high enough for the nearest lords to see. "Here is the charter itself, my lord." I am certain these visiting lords would be most curious to hear why a magistrate would refuse a lawful challenge, openly in front of witnesses, rather than let the old law stand as written. One of the visiting lords, an older woman with silver hair and a face like weathered stone, leaned forward with obvious interest. "I would indeed be curious to hear that, Vane. The charter is the charter." Vane's jaw tightened. Noah watched him calculate, watched him realize that refusing now, in front of rival lords who might use any weakness against him later, would cost him more than the fight itself. Finally, through gritted teeth, Vane said, "Very well. The old law stands. Sir Aldrich Kane will fight for the Hold's judgment, and you, Peddler, since you have paid the right of challenge, will no doubt wish to name your champion." "She names herself," Noah said, and turned to Ugak. "The right belongs to the accused. Free her hands and arm her as the charter demands." A ripple of astonishment moved through the crowd. Vane's composure cracked for just a moment, real fury flashing through his eyes before he smoothed it away. "As you wish," he said silkily. "Though I doubt a starved animal will last 3 strokes against my champion." They struck Ugak's chains off in front of the whole square, and Noah felt his chest ache at the raw, red marks the iron had left on her wrists. He pressed his own trading knife into her palm, the only weapon he owned, its blade honed sharp from years of cutting rope and leather on the road, and her fingers closed around the worn hilt like it was the finest steel ever forged. "It is not much," he said quietly. "It is enough," she said, and then, before the whole watching square, she caught his face in her free hand and kissed him, hard and sure, a claim laid down in front of every soul in Fjord Hold. The crowd gasped, some in outrage, some, surprisingly, in a kind of stunned admiration, and Noah kissed her back without a shred of shame, because he had spent 11 years being invisible on the roads of this world, and he was done hiding what she meant to him. "Come back to me," he whispered against her lips. "Always," she said, and stepped back to face Sir Aldrich Kane. Kane was a mountain of a man, plated in fine armor, a broadsword resting easy in his grip like an extension of his own arm. He looked at Ugak, thin and battered and armed with a trading knife, and laughed, a short, ugly sound, before Vane raised his hand and the square fell into breathless silence, waiting. The signal fell. Kane came in fast for a big man, his broadsword sweeping in a wide arc meant to end the fight in a single stroke, but Ugak was not there when the blade landed. Days and chains had slowed her, starved her, but they had not stolen the instincts of a lifetime spent fighting in the high valleys, and she rolled beneath the swing and came up inside his guard, her knife flashing toward the gap at his armpit where the armor plates did not quite meet. Kane twisted away just in time, cursing, and the crowd erupted into noise, half of them screaming for blood, a few, to Noah's aching relief, screaming for her. The fight was brutal and fast. Kane had size and steel on his side, and twice his sword grazed close enough to open shallow cuts along Ugak's arm and thigh, the crowd gasping each time, Noah's heart in his throat, his hands white-knuckled on the platform rail. But Ugak fought like something wild and cornered, using her smaller blade to slip inside Kane's reach again and again, forcing him to fight close where his size became a liability rather than an advantage. When he stumbled on a loose cobble, she was on him in an instant, driving her knife beneath the edge of his breastplate, and Kane went down with a strangled cry, his sword clattering from his hand. Ugak stood over him, chest heaving, blood running from a dozen small cuts, the trading knife still gripped in her fist, and the square held its breath. Then Noah saw it, one of Vane's guards near the platform steps, drawing a short crossbow, aiming not at Ugak in fair combat but at her back, a coward's shot meant to finish what the law had failed to accomplish. Ugak! Noah shouted, and threw himself forward without a single thought for his own safety, putting himself between the bolt and the woman he loved. The bolt caught him high in the shoulder, a burning, blinding pain that dropped him to his knees on the platform boards, and the square exploded into chaos, screams and shouting, and the visiting lords rising to their feet in outrage at the sight of a magistrate's guard firing on an unarmed peddler mid-duel. Noah! Ugak's voice tore through the noise like a blade, and then she was there, catching him before he could fall fully, her arms fierce and sure around him even as blood soaked through his coat, her eyes blazing with a fury Noah had never seen in her before, not even in the mud on the first day. "I am all right," he gritted out, though the world was going gray at the edges. "I am all right, Ugak, look at me, I am all right, you absolute fool," she snarled, half sob, half fury, cradling his head against her shoulder. "You beautiful, reckless fool." The silver-haired lord who had spoken up earlier was on her feet now, pointing at the guard who had fired the bolt, her voice cutting through the chaos like a whip crack of its own. "Seize that man. Lord Vane, explain to me and to every lord present why your guard fired upon an unarmed sponsor during a lawful trial by combat that your own champion has already lost." The square turned on Vane in that moment, the way a tide turns, sudden and total. The very folk who had jeered and laughed a week ago now shouted for the magistrate's head, and the visiting lords, who cared little for Ugak's freedom but cared a great deal about being made fools of and about a rival lord cheating openly before their eyes, closed ranks against him with cold, political fury. Vane's guards, sensing the shift, made no move to protect him. Two of the visiting lord's own soldiers seized Vane by the arms before he could so much as reach for his sword. "This changes nothing," Vane spat, though his voice had lost all its earlier silk. "The trial is decided. The orc has won her freedom fairly. I never ordered that bolt fired." "Your guard, your square, your law that you yourself invoked," the silver-haired lord said coldly. "You will answer for this before the Hold's Council, Vane, and I will personally see to it that every lord here remembers exactly what we witnessed today." Noah barely heard the rest of it, the world narrowing down to Ugak's face above him, her hands pressing hard against his wound, her voice low and fierce and afraid in a way he had never heard from her before. "Stay with me," she was saying. "Stay with me, Noah. Do you hear me? I did not fight free of that platform to watch you die on it." "Wouldn't dream of it," he managed, and even through the pain he found himself smiling up at her, because the last thing he saw before the world finally went dark was her face, fierce and terrified and so achingly beautiful, bent close over his, and he knew with absolute peaceful certainty that whatever happened next he had done right by her, and that was enough. He woke 3 days later in a soft bed in one of the hold's longhouses, sunlight slanting warm through a shuttered window, and the first thing he saw was Ugak Ironblood asleep in a chair pulled close beside him, her hand wrapped around his. Even in sleep, dark circles beneath her eyes from what he would later learn were 3 sleepless days and nights spent refusing to leave his side. "Ugak," he rasped, his throat dry as old leather, and her eyes snapped open instantly, alert the way only a warrior's could be. "Noah." His name came out of her like a prayer, and then she was leaning over him, her hands framing his face, checking him over with the same fierce intensity she might use to check a blade for flaws. "You are awake. Finally, you are awake, you stubborn, reckless man. How long? 3 days. The healer said the bolt missed anything vital by the width of a finger, but you lost enough blood to fell a lesser man twice over." Her voice cracked on the last words, and Noah realized with a start that Ugak Ironblood, who had faced chains and whips and a trained killer's blade without flinching, was fighting back tears now. "Hey," he said softly, catching one of her hands. "Hey, I am here. I told you I would come back to you too, in a manner of speaking." She laughed, wet and unsteady, and pressed her forehead to his. "You threw yourself in front of a crossbow bolt for me. I would do it again." "Do not you dare," she said fiercely, and kissed him, gentle this time, achingly gentle, as if she were afraid of breaking him further, and Noah kissed her back with everything he had left in his weakened body, and it was, he thought, the finest medicine any healer could have prescribed. She told him everything he had missed while he slept. How Vane had been stripped of his magistracy by the visiting lord's unanimous decree, his cruelty and his cheating too public and too well witnessed to be smoothed over. How he had been sent south under guard to answer to the crown's own court for his conduct. How the Hold's council had named the silver-haired lord, whose name Noah learned was Lady Wren Halloway, as steward until a proper successor could be chosen. She told him that the fisher-folk and shepherds of Fjord, so quick to jeer a week before, had instead spent the last 3 days leaving offerings of bread and dried fish and clean bandages outside the longhouse door, ashamed of their own silence during the auction and eager now to make some small amends. She told him, her voice going soft and wondering, that word had already reached the high valleys, and that her brother Grosh and a dozen riders of the Ironblood clan were 3 days out and closing fast, having heard that his sister had won her freedom in single combat with a human peddler as her sponsor, and if the rumors were to be believed, her lover besides. "They are coming here," Noah said, feeling a fresh spike of nerves cut through the warm haze of relief. "Your clan to Fjord. Do not look so frightened, Peddler," Ugak said, amusement warming her voice for the first time. "My brother will want to look you over, certainly, and he will likely make some crude joke at your expense because that is what brothers do, but he will not harm you, not after what you did for me, not after what the whole hold saw you do." "And what did I do?" Noah asked, though he thought he already knew the answer, watching her face in the golden afternoon light. "You chose me," she said simply, "in front of everyone. When it would have been so much easier, so much safer to walk away and forget the orc woman in chains ever crossed your path. You chose me, and you kept choosing me, every single day since, until I could not remember how to imagine my life without you standing somewhere in it." Noah's throat tightened with an emotion too large for words, so instead he simply drew her down beside him, careful of his healing wound, and held her as close as his weakened arms allowed, and she came willingly, tucking herself against him with a fierce, possessive tenderness that told him more clearly than any words that whatever they had built in that dark fish cellar, and on that bloody platform, was not going to be undone by anything the world threw at them next. He healed slowly over the following 2 weeks, and Ugak barely left his side, splitting her time between tending him and helping Lady Wren Holloway settle the unrest that Vane's fall had left in its wake. Noah watched, quietly proud and a little awestruck, as the same woman who had refused to kneel in the mud now sat at council tables with human elders and fisherfolk representatives, her voice calm and measured, negotiating fair trading terms between the Hold and the Highland clans that would replace the predatory taxes and land grabs Vane had favored. She was, he realized, not only a warrior but a leader in her own right, someone the Hold folk had begun, grudgingly at first and then with genuine respect, to trust. On the day Ugak Ironblood and his riders finally came down from Thornridge Pass into the market square, the same square where his sister had once stood in chains, Noah stood beside Ugak at the palisade gate, his shoulder still bandaged beneath his shirt, his heart pounding with a nervousness that had nothing to do with the healing wound. Ugak was a broad, scarred orc a few years older than Ugak, with their mother's sharp eyes, and he swung down from his horse and crossed the square in long strides, ignoring the wary Hold folk entirely, his gaze fixed on his sister. He caught her up in a crushing embrace that lifted her briefly off her feet, and for a moment the fierce, composed leader Noah had watched negotiate treaties dissolved into something younger, something achingly relieved, as Ugak buried her face against her brother's shoulder. When Ugak finally set her down, his gaze swung to Noah, sharp and assessing, and Noah made himself stand straight despite the flutter of nerves in his chest. "So," Ugak said, in the heavily accented but perfectly serviceable common tongue that clan leaders learned for trading purposes, "this is the peddler who bled for my sister in front of half the Highland lords." "Ugak," Ugak warned, though there was fondness beneath the warning, "I am only saying what everyone already knows." Ugak looked Noah over a moment longer and then, unexpectedly, clasped his forearm in the warrior's grip Noah had seen exchanged between clan riders. "Ironblood clan owes you a debt, Peddler. My sister does not choose lightly. If she has chosen you, then you have my respect, whatever the human Hold folk might think of it." "I did not save her expecting a debt," Noah said honestly. "I did it because I love her." Something in Ugak's scarred face softened at that, and he nodded once, slow and solemn. "Good. That is the only answer I would have accepted." He turned to survey the market square, the longhouses, the fjord beyond, and then looked back at his sister. "Will you return to the high valleys with us then? Mother has been unbearable with worry." Noah felt his stomach drop, a sudden cold fear that after everything, he was about to lose her to a life in the Highlands he could not follow, a clan Hold where a human peddler might never truly belong. But Ugak reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his in full view of her brother, of the Hold folk watching from doorways and market stalls, of everyone. "I will visit," she said, "often. Mother will simply have to accept that her daughter has found a life worth building here as well, on the roads and in this Hold, at the side of a man who bled for me in front of the whole world and never once asked me to be anything other than exactly what I am." Ugak's eyebrows rose, but he did not argue, and something in his expression, half exasperation, half genuine warmth, told Noah that this was simply how things were between this brother and sister, a lifetime of fierce affection wrapped in dry humor. That evening, after Ugak and his riders had made camp outside the palisade, and the Hold had settled into the golden hush of a Highland dusk, Noah and Ugak walked together along the cliff path above the fjord, the water below catching the last light like beaten copper, the longhouses behind them glowing warm with lantern light. "I have been thinking," Ugak said, stopping at the edge of the path where the cliff dropped sharp and clean toward the water far below, the same cliffs that had loomed over her chained and beaten only weeks before, now simply beautiful in the fading light. About what comes next, for us. Tell me, Noah said, and meant it fully, the way he had learned to mean every word he said to her. I do not want to simply be your patient, healing quietly in a longhouse bed, nor do I want to vanish back into the high valleys and become only a memory of a woman you once saved. She turned to face him, her eyes fierce and unguarded in a way that still, after everything, took his breath away. I want to walk your roads with you, Noah Brooks. I know them nearly as well as you do now, from all your talk in that cell, and I have spent my whole life as a scout and a warrior. I could watch your back on the road, trade fairly with clans who trust me, keep you safer than that little trading knife of yours ever could. Noah felt his heart swell so full he thought it might crack right open. You want to travel the back roads with me, as my partner, not just he stumbled, suddenly shy, not just the woman I love, but as a traitor in her own right beside me. Is that so difficult to imagine? No, he said, laughing, half disbelieving of his own good fortune. No, it is the easiest thing in the world to imagine. I have simply never once, in 11 years alone on those roads, imagined it with someone beside me. I did not let myself hope for it. Then hope for it now, Ugak said, stepping close, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, right over the healing wound that had nearly cost him everything. Because I am not something you rescued once and must now let go, Peddler. I am choosing you, today, and every day the road gives us afterward. I want to fall asleep beside your fire and wake beside it too. I want to haggle with merchants at your side and defend your cart with my own blade when bandits are foolish enough to try us. I want all of it, Noah, the whole long, ordinary, dangerous, wonderful road of it with you. Noah did not trust his voice to answer that properly, so instead he kissed her, slow and sure, there on the cliff path above the fjord where the last gold light of day was fading into a soft, star-strewn dusk, and she kissed him back with a fierceness that held nothing back, her arms wrapping around him like she meant never to let go. And for a long, breathless moment the whole world narrowed down to just the two of them, warrior and peddler, orc and human, standing together at last with nothing left to fear. Word of what had happened at Fjord hold spread fast along the highland trading roads that autumn, carried by merchants and drovers and clan riders alike. The tale of the peddler who had bought no slave but had instead broken open an old, forgotten law to win a warrior woman her freedom fair and square. Of the corrupt magistrate brought low before the eyes of rival lords. Of the orc woman who had claimed her human love with a kiss before the whole watching crowd, and never once looked back. Some folk along the road still eyed them warily when Noah's cart came rattling into a village square with Ugak Ironblood walking easy and confident beside the mule, her weapons visible at her hip now, no longer chained, no longer hidden. But more often than not, the wariness melted into curiosity, and the curiosity into welcome, especially once word got around that the pair traded fairly, defended each other fiercely, and had, more than once, talked down tensions between wary holdfolk and passing clan riders simply by being living proof that the old hatreds did not have to be the only story. Lady Wren Halloway, settled now as the hold's new steward, sent word twice that winter asking Ugak's counsel on trading terms with the Highland clans, and each time Ugak and Noah made the journey back to Fjord together, welcomed now not as a fugitive and her rescuer but as honored guests, given a place at the steward's own table, their names spoken with respect in the same market square where Ugak had once stood chained. The fish seller's cell had been torn down entirely by the second winter, the stones repurposed for a new grain store, and where the whipping post had once stood, the holdfolk had planted, of all things, a small garden, tended now by children who had never known the cruelty of the old magistrate's rule. On a bright spring morning nearly a year after the day Noah had first caught a whip in his bare hand to stop it falling on a stranger, he and Ugak came rolling into Fjord's market square once more, the cart laden with goods from a long winter's trading circuit through the high valleys and coastal towns alike. Ugak rode up front beside him now rather than walking, her leathers the same well-worn travel garb she had always favored, though softened now by better food and easier months, her dark eyes bright and unshadowed, scanning the crowd not with a warrior's wariness but with the easy confidence of a woman utterly certain of her place in the world and beside the man she loved. Grosh had ridden down from Thornridge Pass to meet them, as he did most seasons now, and their mother had come with him this time, a formidable old orc woman who took one long look at Noah, snorted, and declared that he had at least improved on his kettle prices since their last dealing, which Ugak informed him, laughing, was as close to a blessing as her mother was ever likely to give. That evening, with the whole square lit by lantern glow and the fjord wind carrying the smell of wood smoke and roasting fish, Noah stood with Ugak's hand in his before a gathering of hold folk and clan riders both, an easy, mingled crowd that would have been unthinkable a year before, and he thought of the day he had first seen her, chained and defiant, refusing to kneel. He thought of the cell and the kisses stolen through iron bars, and the crossbow bolt that had nearly ended everything, and the cliff path where she had chosen him, openly, fully, with nothing held back. "I love you," he said quietly just for her, though half the square was near enough to hear it. "I loved you before I understood what that whip crack in the mud was going to cost me, and I have loved you more every single day since." Ugak Ironblood, warrior of the Highland clans, who feared no blade and had once refused to kneel before a magistrate's cruelty, turned to him now and knelt for no one, but she did lean her forehead against his, slow and tender, her hand coming up to rest warm against his heart. "I love you, Noah Brooks," she said, her voice rough with feeling in a way that made his chest ache with happiness. "You gave up everything you owned for a stranger in chains, and you have given me a life I never thought I would want, one built on the road, between two peoples who were taught to hate each other and chose, instead, to build something better. I will walk beside you until the roads run out, Peddler. That is my promise, and unlike some, I intend to keep it." Around them, the lanterns burned warm against the highland dark. The fjord murmured far below, and Noah Brooks, once a lonely wanderer with nothing to his name but a cart and a mule, and a lifetime of roads walked alone, drew the fierce, magnificent woman who had chosen him into his arms, and kissed her there in the open square for anyone and everyone to see. No chains, no cruelty, no fear left between them, only the whole wide, waiting road ahead, and the certainty, hard-won and unshakable, that neither of them would ever have to walk it alone again.